All right, guys, welcome back. It's Thursday. Hope everyone had a good day. Today, you guys are going to be doing something a little bit different than yesterday. And some of this is similar to what you've done in the past. Okay, so this should look familiar right from the get go. So, the first thing that I want you guys to work on is new vocabulary. Okay, so again, you have vocabulary words here on the top with the definitions. And then on the bottom, you guys will have fill-ins with little clues on the side to kind of help you figure out how to figure out each one. Okay, so I'm going to go over these words and their definitions. On the bottom, okay, there are strategies that you can use to determine the meaning of the unfamiliar words in these fill-ins. Right, so just a quick little reminder, sometimes the definition is near the word. So in this one here, I have discrimination or unfairly targeting one or more groups. This is the definition of that word, okay? Sometimes I'll have synonyms near the word. So it says when people know they're vulnerable or defenseless. Defenseless is a synonym for the word vulnerable. Sometimes you will see examples of the type, right? So it says vulnerable people, such as young children, the elderly, or handicapped individuals. So these here underline are examples of what it means to be vulnerable. Sometimes there will be an antonym. An antonym is the word that's opposite. So there will be an antonym near it. So here I have discrimination as opposed to the fairness for all people can have damaging effects on a target group. So the opposite of discrimination is fairness. And then the last one here is sometimes you'll have a analogy, a simile, or a metaphor. So these are all comparisons of a word. So here I have vulnerable people can be like fragile glass in need of care and attention. So being like fragile glass tells me what vulnerable means. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to go over the actual definitions of each word, and then you guys can use the context clues to figure out the meaning. All right, so again, you're going to read these definitions, then use context clues to determine the word that best fits. All right, so I'm going to go over these words. The first word is pronounced taunted. Okay, so taunted is a verb. It means to be provoked or challenged with insulting remarks, right? So when you're being taunted or when someone's taunted, it means that they're challenging you, right? So again, when somebody's talking smack, you're being taunted, right? It's almost like a dare, right? It's a taunt. The word zeal is an adjective. It's a descriptive word. Okay, so zeal means to have great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective. So when you're really excited about something, you are filled with zeal. Okay. The next word is pronounced pristine. Okay, so something that's pristine is in its original condition or unspoiled. Nothing has gone bad with it. So one thing that I kind of think of when I think of the word pristine would be like baseball cards. People who save baseball cards, they want to keep the baseball card pristine because it holds its value. Same thing with like dolls or things that people want to cherish, silverware, like fancy silverware or crystal. The next word is pronounced harboring. Harboring means to keep in one's mind, especially secretly. Okay, so what are you keeping in your mind? It's usually a thought or a feeling, and it's generally a negative one. So people generally harbor bad things in their mind, right? So they're harboring a negative secret. So the girl was harboring the fact that she wanted to break up with her boyfriend, something like that. Okay. A sanctuary is a place of refuge or safety. So it's a safe place. Um, so again, refugees, people who are dealing with maybe war in their country, are always trying to find a sanctuary, somewhere safe for them to go. Incompetent, okay, means not having or showing the necessary skills to do something successfully. So if you're incompetent, it means you can't do something. The opposite would be competent. Competent means that you are able to do something. So again, someone who's incompetent doesn't have the skills to do something. Daunting. Okay, daunting means seeming difficult to deal with in the anticipation or intimidating. So something really hard that you have to do that you think you might not be able to be successful on is something that is daunting. Okay, something that's very hard or difficult. This word is pronounced genocide. Okay, so the genocide is the deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. Right. So this word, unfortunately, deals with the large loss of life and it's basically people being targeted for a certain reason. So, over history and over time, there have been groups of people who have been targeted and killed based off of either their religious beliefs or based off of their ethnicity or racial background. So that's what a genocide is. Ominous is giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is going to happen, threatening or inauspicious. So the root word here of omen is kind of like what ominous means. So it's like a clue that something bad is going to happen. So one example I always think of is like dark gray clouds in the sky. Okay, those are ominous of an impending storm. And 10 is preponderance. Okay, so preponderance is the quality or fact of being greater in number, quantity, or importance. It's when you see a lot of something. It's a preponderance. Okay. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to take these words and figure out which ones go in the bottom. Okay. So you can pause it now, and then we're going to get started on the reading when you're done. Okay. So now what we're going to do today is we're going to read. Okay. So hold on one second. Okay, so what we're going to do now is read. So let's take a look. All right. I don't know why that got closed. Okay, so we are on chapter 15. Let's go down there. Okay, whoop, that's 16, a little bit too far ahead. All right, so remember we left off here, and we had Luke go inside the house, and the girl tackles him, and then she lets him up because he says that he is the population police. Okay, chapter 15. Luke sat up, checking his arms to make sure she hadn't broken anything. "You're lying," the girl said, but she made no effort to tackle him again. She crouched, looking puzzled for a few moments. Then she grinned. "I got it. You're another one. Great code word. I'll have to think about that, using that for the rally." Now it was Luke's turn to squint in confusion. The girl giggled. "I mean, you're another shadow child, right?" Shadow? Luke wondered why his brain seemed to be slowing down. Was it just because she seemed several miles ahead of him? "That's not the term you use. I thought shadow child was universal. But, an illegal. Someone whose parents broke population law 3903. A third." I Luke couldn't bring himself to confess. He'd broken so many taboos today, leaving the house, standing in the open yard, talking to a stranger. Why did one more violation matter? Taboo is something that you're not supposed to do. That's what taboo means. "You can say it," the girl coaxed. "I'm a third child. Why should there be anything wrong with that?" Luke was spared having to answer her because she suddenly sprang to her feet, exclaiming, "Oh no, the alarm!" She raced down the hall and around the corner. Luke followed to find her jerking open a closet door, then punching buttons on a panel of colored lights. Too late, drat. She ran to a phone. Luke followed breathlessly. She dialed. Luke watched in amazement. He never talked on the phone. His parents had told him the government could trace his calls, could tell if a voice on the phone was from a person who was allowed to exist or not. "Dad," she made a face. I know. Call the security company and get them to cancel the alarm, okay? And might I remind you that the penalty for harboring a shadow child is $5 million or execution, depending on the mood of the judge?" She rolled her eyes at Luke while she listened to what seemed to be a long answer. "Oh, these things happen." Yeah, I love you too, Dad. Thanks." She hung up. Luke wondered if he should run back to his house immediately before the population police really did show up. "They can find you now," Luke said, "just from the phone." The girl laughed. "They say, but everybody knows the government's not that competent." Competent means smart. Luke started inching towards the back door just in case. "But there really was an alarm?" he asked. "And you got security guards?" "Sure, doesn't everybody?" The girl took another look at Luke. "Oh, maybe not." So obviously when she looks at Luke, she sees something. Probably the fact that he doesn't look very wealthy. She winced apologetically as soon as she'd said that. Luke decided to ignore the insult. "Did the security guards know you're here?" he asked. "Of course not," the girl said. "If they'd come, I'd have to hide. Personally, I think my family just has an alarm system to make sure I stay in this house. They don't know I can disable it, but," she gave him an evil grin, "I set it off sometimes just for fun." "That's fun?" Luke asked. He thought another third child would understand him, but be just like him. This girl sure wasn't. "Aren't you scared the guards might find you?" "Not really," the girl shrugged. "And see, doing it on purpose every now and then helped us today. My dad Didn't really even ask why the system needed to be stopped. He just thought it was me making trouble again. In a twisted way, she did kind of make sense. But trying to figure everything out made Luke's head hurt. He glanced towards the door. If he could just get safely home, he'd never complain about being bored again. Here he felt as baffled as Alice in Wonderland from one of the old books in the attic, or he remembered something he read in a nature book. Maybe he was like the prey of a snake that hypnotized its victims before it ate them. He didn't think the girl would hurt him, but she might keep him confused and fascinated until the population police or the security guards or someone else arrived. The girl saw where he was looking. Am I scaring you? She asked. Shadow kids can be so jumpy. You're safe, you know. How about if we start over? Would you care for a seat? What's your name anyway? Luke told her. Nice to meet you, the girl said, shaking his hand in a way that made him feel like she wasn't the kind of making fun of him. Then she let him sit down on a couch in the room he'd first entered. She perched beside him. I'm Jen. Really. It's Jennifer Rose Talbot, but do I look like a Jennifer? She shook her head and spread out her arms as if Luke should understand something from her rumpled sweatshirt and her messy hair. Luke frowned. I don't know, he said. I don't know any Jennifers, just Matthew, Mark, and Mother and Dad. He knew his parents' real names were Edna and Harlan, but he wondered if he shouldn't keep that a secret just in case. Probably he shouldn't have even mentioned Matthew and Mark, but he was surprised into it, thinking suddenly how there was a world full of people outside of his house with a world full of different names he'd never heard of. The girl said. Then I have to explain. A Jennifer's supposed to be like a really girly and prissy, so the joke's on Mom. She wanted some frilly little girl she could put into a lacy dress and sit in the corner like a doll, she paused. Are Matthew and Mark your older brothers? Luke nodded. So you've never met anybody outside your immediate family? Luke shook his head no. Jen looked so amazed he felt he had to defend himself. And you have? He asked with almost the same taunting voice he sometimes used with Mark. Well, yeah, she said. But you're a third child, too, Luke protested. A shadow child, right? He suddenly felt like it might be easy to cry if he let himself. All his life he'd been told he couldn't do everything Matthew and Mark did because he was the third child. But if Jen could go about freely, it didn't make sense. Had his parents lied? Don't you have to hide? He asked. Sure, Jen said, mostly, but my parents are very good at bribery. So am I. She grinned wickedly. Then she squinted at Luke. How did you know I was a third child? How did I know you? How did you know I was here? Luke told her. Somehow it seemed important to start with the woods coming down, so it turned into a very long story. Jen interrupted frequently with questions and comments. So, you've never been away from your house except for going to the backyard or the barn? You've stayed inside for 6 months? Gosh, you must really hate these houses, huh? And then when he got to the part about seeing her face in the window, she bit her lip. My dad would kill me if he knew I'd done that. But the mirrors are messed up, and Carlos bet me I didn't even know what the weather was outside, and... Huh? Luke said, mirrors? Carlos? Jen waved away the questions. Luke Garner, she announced solemnly, you have come to the right place. Forget that hiding like a mole stuff. I'm your ticket out. Okay, chapter 16. Do you want any more potatoes, Luke? Mother offered that night at supper. Luke! Her voice got more insistent. Luke! So obviously Luke's daydreaming. Luke jerked his attention back to his family. Mother was holding the bowl of mashed potatoes out to him. No, Luke said. No thanks, I still got some. More for me, Mark crowed. Luke tuned them out again. He'd barely eaten his first serving of potatoes. He'd been so busy thinking about his secret visit to the sports family's house, he couldn't believe he'd dared to go. Just the thought of his run through that yard made his heart beat fast, remembering fear and pride. He'd really done it. And then meeting Jen was amazing. There's no other word for it. He was so overwhelmed with wonder at everything he'd seen at her house, everything she told him, that he started to say, Did you know that, Jen? At the last minute, he clamped his teeth shut, holding the words in. He thought he'd burst. He could feel his face flush red with the effort of keeping still. He bent his head low over his plate so nobody would see. How could he ever manage to keep Jen a secret? But he had to, because if he told, they'd forbid him to go back. And he had to go back. We'll set up a signal, Jen had said, something I can see. But don't have vents to look out like I do, Luke protested. You can look out the window. Oh, when the mirrors work, it's not a problem. Look. She took him over to the window near the sliding glass door and showed him a mirror that reflected a wide view of the Talbots' backyard and the landscape beyond. It showed just the corner of the Garner's barn, but when Jen turned it a bit, the entire Garner house came to view. Luke wondered if his parents could set up the same kind of system. Then he looked at the mirror again and decided it might be expensive. Anyway, how would he explain where he'd gotten the idea? Let's see, Jen said. A signal. I've got it. How about if I look out every morning at 9 and you come over here and you shine your flashlight at me? I'll shine one back if everything's safe. We don't have a flashlight, Luke said. Not that work, I mean. Jen frowned. Why not? Well, we haven't had batteries in, I don't know, 5 years, Luke explained. In fact, he felt proud even to remember what a flashlight was. Okay, okay. Jen said, no flashlight, no computer. Oh, we've got a computer, Luke said. My parents do. Still works, but it's in Dad's office in front of the house. I'm not allowed in there. Anyhow, I'd never be allowed to touch that computer. He remembered once when he was very young, maybe 3 or 4, and he followed Mother into Dad's office while she was cleaning. The rows of letters on the computer keyboard looked like a toy to him. I mean, he reached on one finger and he tapped the space bar over and over again. Mother turned around and freaked out. They can find you now, she screamed. Oh, if they're watching. For weeks after that, she hid him even more carefully than ever, locking him in his room when she locking him in his room when she had to go outside. Jen rolled her eyes. Don't tell me your family believes that government propaganda stuff, she said. They spent so much money trying to convince people they could monitor all the TVs and computers. You know they couldn't have afforded to do it, actually. I've been using our computer since I was 3 and watching TV too, and they never caught me. How about a candle? What? It took Luke a minute. She was talking about the signal again. Candles, they're all in the kitchen. I'm not allowed. Jen mimicked the words as he said them. To go in there? They've got you an awful short leash, don't they? She asked. No, I mean, yeah, but they're just trying to protect me. Jen shook her head. Yeah, I've heard that one. Do you ever hear of disobeying? Luke started defensively. I'm here, aren't I? Jen laughed. You got me, but listen, you can't do candles or a flashlight. How about just turning on the light so I can see? Luke was quicker this time, figuring out that she was still talking about the signal. The one by the back door, Luke said. You can't miss it. He wasn't allowed to turn that on either, but he didn't dare say not allowed again. Now Luke toyed with his mashed potatoes. His entire conversation with Jen had been like that. She mocked. He defended, but she always got her way. Of course, he defended her to himself. She knew and had seen so much more than him. After he'd finished his story on the couch, she told him hers. First, she said defiantly, my parents had me on purpose. 13 years ago, Mom already had Bull and Brawn from her first marriage. Your brothers? Luke asked. Yeah, Bolton and Brownlee, really, but what kind of names are those for knuckleheads like them? Mom was going through some super snobbish upper class phase with her husband number one. She's had more than one husband? Luke asked. He didn't know that was possible. Sure, Jen said. Dad, who's really stepdad, is number 3. Luke found that so confusing he just kept his mouth shut. Anyhow, Mom was dying to have a little girl, so when she and husband number 2 got together, she went and paid some doctor lots of money so she could get pregnant. What if he'd been a boy? Luke asked. Oh, they got that in the beginning in the gender selection experiments. Luke must have given Jen a particularly blank look because she explained it. That means they made sure I was a girl. Doctors can do that, you know. But the government outlawed that procedure because they were afraid I'd throw the population even more out of whack. I'm sure my parents paid a lot for it. Were your mom and dad trying for a girl? Luke thought about it. He remembered their mom saying she wanted 4 boys, but would she have wanted a girl even more? Someone like Mother? He couldn't really picture a girl in the house. They weren't trying for anything, he said. I was surprised. Luck. Jen nodded. I didn't think they paid for you, she said. Then she put her hand over her mouth. That sounded really terrible, didn't I? I didn't mean anything by it. It's just you're the first person I've ever met who wasn't a baron. How do you know I'm not? Luke asked stiffly. Well, Jen waved her hand in a way that made Luke even more aware of the contrast between his ragged flannel shirt and patched jeans and Jen's perfect house. Look, don't be mad. It doesn't matter. Or maybe it does, but I think it's cool that you're not a baron. You can help me even more. Help? Luke asked. With the rally, Jen said. She bit her lip. Should I? There's no way you can be an infiltrator, is there? Can I trust you? Of course you can, Luke said. He felt insulted again. Jen leaned her head back and stared at the ceiling as if an answer was written there. Then she looked back at Luke. I'm sorry I'm botching this. I'm not used to really talking. It's just on the net. Look, I trust you, but I'm not the only one involved, so let's wait, okay? Okay, Luke said. But he couldn't help but sounded injured. Jen leaned over and gave his shoulders a quick shake. Oh, don't say it like that. Say, okay, Jen, I respect your judgment, or okay, Jen, whatever you think is best. She giggled. That's what Dad tells me I should say when I disagree with him. Can you believe it? Lawyers. Luke was glad the subject had changed. Your dad's a lawyer? He asked. Jen rolled her eyes. Yeah, all Mom's husbands have been. Strange taste, huh? Number 1 was an environmental lawyer, of all things. Number 2 was corporate. That's how they had enough money to get me. Dad, number 3, it's the government. High up, I might add. But if you're an illegal, Luke thought he couldn't have gotten any more confused. Jen laughed. Haven't you learned? Government leaders are the worst ones for the breaking the laws. How do you think we got this house? How do you think I got internet access? How do you think we live? I don't know, Luke said, fully honest. I don't think I know much of anything. Jen patted his head as if he were a little kid or a dog. That's okay, she said. You'll learn. It wasn't long after that Luke said she had to leave because he was afraid Dad or Matthew or Mark might come home and lunch for early. He dreaded the trip back. Jen walked into the door, chattering the whole way. I'll fix that screen at Dealin with the security system so no one will know you're here. And she said, oh, no. Luke followed her gaze. She was staring at the 3 pinpoints of blood on the carpet. I'm sorry, Luke said. That must have been from when I scraped my hand. I'll clean it up. There's still time. Secretly, he was glad of the delay. No, 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 Jen said impatiently. I don't care about the carpet. Just the mom and dad will know. And when they see that I don't have any cuts. Then, before Luke could even see what she was doing, she thrust her hand towards the torn part of the screen. The jagged edge didn't cut immediately, so she held the screen with her right hand and raked it across her left. When Jen pulled her hand back, Luke saw a gash even deeper than his. Jen squeezed out a few drops of blood and let them fall to the carpet. There, she said. Stunned, Luke backed out the door. So this is kind of odd that she did that. So she basically just cut herself. Come back soon, farmer boy, Jen said. Luke turned and ran, blindly, not even slowing down to creep alongside the barn. He went straight to the back door of his house, yanked it open, and let it bang shut behind him. Now, sitting at supper, he felt his heart pounding again as he thought of how dangerous that had been. Why hadn't he looked first? Why hadn't he crawled? He poked his fork into the potatoes, now gone cold and congealed. He watched Mother gathering up dirty dishes while Dad, Matthew, and Mark leaned back in their chairs. Talking of grain yields, Jen had scared him, that's why. She, seeing her cut her hand, had terrified him. How could she do something like that for him when they'd only just met? Okay, so now what I want you guys to do today is you're going to be filling out a compare and contrast character sheet. Okay, so one side is Luke, the other side is Jen. You're going to focus here on their personality, here on thoughts about the government, here on their access to nice things, and here about their knowledge of the world. Okay, so Luke's section, Jen's section. Okay, all right, get to it.